Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Finding the Right Direction panel. My name is David Shenmiller. I'll be moderating. I'm really excited to speak with our panel of directors. We got some really interesting voices here, so I think we'll get a really interesting broad range of perspectives. So please welcome me in joining them. First up, we have Dave Merlino and Dustin Sweet. They're the directing duo behind the documentary film Apache Blues. Welcome home. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have the director for In the Light of the Moon and host of the Pitch podcast, Leah St. Marie.
Hi.
Hello. And last but certainly not least, we have the director for Me, Myself, and the Void, Timothy Haddocky.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first just want to say thank you all for coming. You've all made some really fantastic films, very distinct films, very different from one another. So I'm really curious to kind of dive into some of these questions and just talk about your process and your thoughts on filmmaking. And I think it'll be really interesting. So I think a good way to kick this off is to acknowledge that film, as the cliche goes, takes a village. It's a collaborative art form. So I'm curious for all of your perspectives, and jump in whenever you feel like it, as to what makes a harmonious and inspiring collaboration. How do you encourage cooperation on set? And what is the director's role in that? Any thoughts? Don't jump in all at once.
I'll start. Dustin and I were really lucky to get this advice at the very start of our career. We'd gone to a 2-day intensive directing workshop with the director, Darren Scott. And what he taught, and I took to heart, is a director is really just the lens that focuses all the good ideas on set. At the end of the day, if the movie's bad, you're going to get the blame. If it's good, you're going to get the praise. But no one's going to say, oh, that movie could have been great if the second assistant to the whatever department could have done a better job. It's all going to fall on you. So if the second assistant to whatever department has a really good idea, why wouldn't you take that idea? And in order to encourage those ideas, you have to be approachable and for lack of a better way to say it, be a nice person. And just you're marshaling everything to keep it moving.
It's like top tier, hard for us to do.
So that's what I've always kept to heart. You're the focus of all the good ideas, and keep it running.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, on a documentary, how does that collaboration work? Because it seems like, you don't have things to rehearse necessarily. There's no actors who you're trying to get a performance out of. What is that process like? What is collaboration on a documentary like? And I don't know if you have any experience with narrative, but I'd be curious to get Leah, maybe your perspective, and Timothy, your perspective on doing it in the narrative form, scripted form.
Go for it, Dave. You're doing great.
There. Well, we actually started out as screenwriters and then did narrative shorts. And so when the idea of the documentary was given to us, our first thought is that doesn't even have a script. Dustin comes from animation, where everything is done in pre-production and everything in a documentary is done in post-production when you figure out what your story is. So it was
living nightmare. Yeah, it's terrible. But
I was going to say steep learning curve. But in terms of the harmony, what we learned is, we're dealing with veterans, Vietnam veterans, some who had never told their story. To them, we're Hollywood. To us, we're two guys trying to script together a movie. But you can't just walk into their living room, set up cameras, and be like, all right, go. Tell me your worst, deepest, darkest secrets you haven't told for 50 years. Oh, by the way, I'm Dave. So it was a lot of really working with setting up a comfortable environment that they could tell those stories in. And that's, I think, where the harmony came in, is really taking care of your subjects in a documentary, to give them the space to feel like they could talk.
And just to follow that up on that just a little bit more, how do you create that comfortable environment? Do you make them tea? You tell them they're pretty? What's your approach to that?
Dustin did tell them they're pretty as he was putting the makeup on them.
I absolutely did. Absolutely. You hit it on the head, David. basically it's just, calming people down. Whenever a new human gets in front of the camera and lights and the whole thing, you had it. Everybody's had it. You seize up for a second, and telling a joke, being the first person to just kind of break the tension and really ease into the piece. It really helps. Dave, I always tell everybody that the trick to a really good interview is to make sure that your interviewer is a CIA trained interrogator. So that's who I bring with me, and I let Dave do all the question asking because he used to have a whole other life in law enforcement, and so for me it was very much just tell jokes, make sure everybody's relaxed, kind of vibe with people and make sure they're in the right place, and then kind of sit back and make sure the audio's working out.
Yeah.
And also, we didn't bring in any equipment for at least a couple hours after we met them. Just sat and talked. But you had to be careful because sometimes good stories came out before everything was set up, and it's really hard to get that. Like, I
learned to have an iPhone like recording right away, just audio, but kind of like in my pocket, and then not worry about it. So that if a story came up that we desperately wanted to have, we had the audio and we could do something with that. But otherwise, just like let it make.
Well, yeah, I see you nodding, and Timothy as well. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I'll let you go first, Leah. Yeah.
I'll go.
Leah, you're on.
I know what the documentary space is because I'm producing a couple of documentaries, and those stories that you get before the interview, when it's just chatting, it's just a different level. Mm-hmm. I understand that. Oh, I wish I had been recording.
Yeah, we did spend like an hour one day and post looking for a story we knew we had, and then it was the realization it was before the cameras were on.
So, Leah, how do you go about creating a harmonious and inspiring collaboration on set? How do you encourage cooperation?
I have kind of like a side quest for that, which is I was sitting in the audience to my friend who was graduating from the UCLA director's program. And one of the heads of that department was talking on stage, and something that she said that has stuck with me, that I carry with me, is if your dreams only include yourself, you're not dreaming big enough. And so when you're on a set as a director, you're a director for this project, but everyone else around you has different aspirations than the job that you put them in. And so talk to them and see how you can help facilitate what it is that they want, because it brings them back to your table when you need them again.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Timothy, you're nodding.
Yeah, that resonates. That definitely resonates with me, and I think it's probably going to be a combination of what everybody else has said. But I think certainly the more I've been doing it, I think I sort of had what I think a lot of directors probably have as their sort of development, which is that when you're sort of younger and first starting out, you sort of have the instinct of like, I should be talking all the time. I should be giving people everything constantly because that's what a director does. And then, the longer I've been doing it, the more I've just kind of come to appreciate that it's wrapping your head around the contradiction of the job, which is set a direction. People need to sense that there's a vision and a plan where you're going. But at the same time, you need to leave room, and you want to leave room because like you said, Leah, you're working with all these amazing people who are going to bring all these great ideas, and that echoes what you were saying, Dave. People are going to bring stuff to it, and it's going to make it better than you could have ever thought. But at the same time, you need to be able to like filter and kind of go, okay, no, but actually we're maybe heading over here, or so it's kind of wrapping your head around. It's both of those things at the same time. Those are two contradictory things, and you have to be able to be both of those roles. And I think sort of learning to switch between that. But I think people like to feel heard. And I think creatives also crave a bit of limitation, like I feel like they want to be told like, okay, tell me what box I'm in. And then maybe they'll push against that box, but they kind of want, because I feel like maybe even just for us, like I think about that when I get a project. It's like when people tell me do whatever you want, that actually weirdly makes me freeze. Whereas if I'm told, okay, paint here, then, that'll give me something. So yeah, that's probably what I'd add to the conversation. Yeah.
Interesting. I would love to talk about some of your films specifically and individually. So, Dave and Dustin, for Apache Blues, making a film that delves into such emotional and historical themes, I imagine that's quite challenging. having a balance between honoring the subject matter, but you also are trying to tell a compelling narrative that is engaging. So, do you have any thoughts on how you balance those two things, the delicacy of the subject matter, but this is something that people are going to watch and consume, so to speak?
Yeah, I think when you're making a documentary, it's very much going to reveal what it is to you later on. So you get a subject that you're interested in, and we met these guys and got we met these guys in kind of a surreptitious way, and then it just kind of developed, And I think they're such easygoing, open-hearted guys all the way to the bone, and so for me, it became about making sure that they carried the level of dignity that they walk around with every day onto the big screen. That's really who those guys are, all the way to the bone. They're really cool guys. And I don't know, Dave, you said it really well a couple of weeks ago. If you're making a documentary and you start off, or you end up in post production, you've got the movie that you thought you shot. You're not making a documentary. You're making a commercial.
An opinion piece.
Yeah.
You went out and found the exact things that you thought should be said and put those in the movie. And you didn't really, and the movie we have is not the movie we thought we were going to make.
Oh,
we thought it was about two guys born after the Vietnam War, just hearing these stories minus the filter of what we learned in school and the political, we just wanted to hear from the soldiers. And we found out it was actually more important for these guys to be able to tell their story than even us listening to it, and went with that. And we actually asked this exact question to Randall Wallace. It's in the movie because he directed We Were Soldiers about Vietnam. And how do we honor, a story, but also, 57,000 people died in this war. This is a big thing that you can't just make your own. And he said he got the advice that you can't let the facts get in the way of the story. People want to change that to don't let the facts get in the way of the truth. But what he's saying is, especially when doing a Vietnam documentary, it'd be really easy and a lot of, this is what happened. And then the U.S. moved troops here. And you can tell all the facts of what happened during the war. That doesn't mean you told what the story was. What is the story? And that's what you have to keep focusing on. What's your story that you're going for?
Very interesting. Leah, I'd love to kind of move to you and your films a little bit for In the Light of the Moon, but also beyond that, with the rest of your work, it seems like you have a penchant for genre bending. Would you agree with that? And I'm curious, if so, what draws you to explore and blend different genres in your scripts?
I would definitely agree with that. I'm such a fan of horror. I used to be a film projectionist for 10 years, all up and down the East Coast, ending on Block Island, off of Rhode Island, where I lived inside the movie theater. And I love horror movies, and I love magical realism. And I think that you can see that with my short film that I did, Good Girls, and the art house film that I directed, In the Light of the Moon. Why do I like this? I don't know. Stephen King was once asked, how are you a horror writer? He says, you can set me in front of a lake and you can set John Irving in front of the lake. We're going to look over that lake and we're each going to see a story. He's going to see a dead kid drowning. I'm going to see the kid rising back up to conquer the people who killed him.
Huh.
I can't explain why I love horror. I just do.
Well, why does anyone like anything? But it's not a conscious choice for you to you don't sit down and say, well, I would love to take this and that and put those together. It just sort of organically happens when you write.
It's the way my mind works, which is pretty scary.
Well, it's given us some good stuff to watch, so we appreciate it. Even though it might be scary for you. And Tim, for Me, Myself, and the Void, you explore some really intriguing themes, and I was wondering if you can kind of discuss, to the level that you want, the messages and ideas that you were aiming to convey through your film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for Me, Myself, and the Voids, it probably, if I had to try and surmise what the core idea or theme I was chasing was this idea of like, what would it be like to kind of see yourself through a third person, like to step outside of yourself and kind of witness your behavior and ways in which you've maybe not been great or been hurtful, or, you know, because I think we all kind of are guilty at times, you know, like a lot of my mental health journey and therapy and stuff, you know, I feel like that's often how I would articulate what therapy is. It's like a therapist showing you, this is a narrative you're telling yourself, and maybe it's not true. And here's the ways in which it's not true. And here's the reasons you believe it. And I think sort of, I became sort of very interested in like, okay, how can I represent that, not just visually, but also maybe make that sort of a mystery, like we're sort of in this character's point of view, and then as the story goes on, kind of reveal the ways in which the sort of things he's telling himself aren't real. You know, he's been telling himself a false story. He's been living by sort of a code that isn't serving him. You know, and I thought that would be interesting to kind of try and capture that in something that was kind of couched as a mystery story. Yeah, you know, because again, it's kind of what I said. For me, that's what therapy was. It was sort of someone kind of echoing my own thoughts back in me, and then sort of realizing like, oh, hang on, there's parts of this that I, you know, arbitrarily believe because, you know, certain experiences or that kind of thing. So that kind of became my once we sort of cracked it, that became what I was very excited to chase.
And I'm curious, when it comes to actually, you know, taking these ideas and the story that you want to tell and executing it, going back to our original question of collaboration, you're working with other creatives, and this question is for the whole group, but Timothy, if you want to take it to start, how do you effectively communicate that vision? How do you take that idea and that story you want to tell and articulate it to the rest of your collaborators?
Yeah, well, I think sort of like I have this notion or this belief that there's sort of, at least there's, you know, that contradiction I was talking about earlier, is that there's definitely like a core to your idea, right? Like there's sort of like a, look, this is what I'm interested in chasing. And if you're able to sort of articulate like for everything else, things are going to change. A location's going to fall through. We're going to discover stuff as we go, but this is kind of where we're heading. And I think if you can kind of communicate the core, what I always kind of find interesting is that then departments bring stuff to you, you know, like, you know, you'll have these beautiful conversations with all your collaborators, and they'll share their own stories and from their perspective about what they think this experience would be like. And they'll bring, you know, and then sort of, if you bring that sort of to the center, you know, like I have this joke that it's basically you just go, is this something? And then hopefully your creative collaborators will go, yeah, and here's what I think that, you know, and then you kind of create this really nice sandbox, but you've set the tone and you've set like a path that you're going to go down. Yeah, that's sort of creative core. That's sort of lately like what I try and like hone in on. There's something that I need to hold on to, is like, this is kind of where we're heading, you know. So that people don't feel like we're just wandering around in the dark, you know, and not like anything can happen. Yeah.
What about with you know, Dave and Dustin? I'm curious, like, because you're doing documentary, do you go in looking for something? Do you kind of have a camera and you're like, okay, whatever we get, we get? What's that process like? And then again, how do you work with other creatives in order to get something out of it?
Well, I think coming from animation, I'm always thinking in terms of, you know, shots and frames and where the camera is going to move and how it's going to be. And I think, you know, the documentary process for me has been a lot of seeing what you can do with a lockdown frame and setting up, you know, interesting things to offset that. You know, nobody wants to watch the talking head documentary where everybody just sits there and talks to each other for a long time. And I find that I have a really nice collaborative relationship with Dave because we've known each other for so long. And I can show up with, you know, a core of a good idea surrounded by a bunch of trash ideas that I got from, you know, watching B movies all weekend. And I trust Dave to tell me that they're dumb ideas. And I don't get my feelings hurt by it. We whenever we work with somebody else, somebody comes in at some point, someone will look at us and be like, how do you guys stand each other? And it's like, well, you know, we've been giving each other a hard time for 20 years. So it's
My daughters actually said last night, "You guys are so terrible to each other." Yeah, it breaks the tension. I, in terms of like working on the documentary, in terms of how you let it flow on the set, I fell back on my interviewing time of building rapport. And like I really despise when I watch a documentary and the interviewer is just going down a list of questions like, this day this happened, great, and then and just write down the questions. It's like, are you even listening to what they're saying, or are you just in your mind like, I've got to get number 3, I've got to get number 4? I had an idea of like there were certain things that we needed to cover, but you got to let it go where it goes. Like, where is that conversation going to go? And every once in a while, it's like, okay, this is winding down, and then I'd bring it back to a point that I knew we had to hit. But then you just kind of got to, let it run. And that's how we found things that we didn't think we were looking for. But also in terms of working with, I mean, on this, it was just Dustin and I and our cameraman, Charles Schaefer. He had just turned 21 on our first trip. And, he rode 20,000 miles in the car with us. And, we took on the big brother roles to him. But also I think, you look across filmmaking and you see directors who have worked with the same cinematographers movie after movie after movie. When you find someone that you can communicate with and you get along great and you make something great, you just want to keep working with people and running with that.
Yeah, that trust, once you start building that trust, it's really nice. Like Charles, today, I trust Charles with almost anything. And just, if he says, I want to do it like this, I'm like, yeah, go for it. The first couple of days that we worked together, I wanted to look over his shoulder and check his frames and stuff like that. But after a couple of days, man, he was taking such good pictures. I was like, all right, cool, run with it. And it really freed us up. It really freed us up creatively to trust the other people on our team.
Yeah, Tim and Leah, how do you kind of build rapport with people on your set?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly, I'm both like, my mum's English, so I've got the sort of banter, let's not take ourselves too seriously thing sort of built in culturally. And I do think it applies to trying to, of course, we're all serious about what we do and we want to be good artists and make good creative work, but I think at the same time it's telling stories. And I think that element of play and we're not taking ourselves too seriously is important. Like, I resonate with what Dustin and Dave were saying about, that there has to be an environment where people feel like they can be silly, share an idea that they wouldn't like. I think if you've created an environment where people feel like they can kind of share anything, the whole idea about no bad ideas is because, yes, we know there are some things might not be appropriate, but sometimes being willing to go there gets you but in a roundabout way to exactly where you need to go. And I think if you cut off that sense of exploration and that sense of play, you're shutting yourself off to all these opportunities. Now, of course, at times as a director, you need to know, okay, let's hone it in, let's bring it back to where. But I think I certainly subscribe to that, and I also don't take myself. I don't take myself too seriously. It's like, of course, I'm diligent about what I want to do, but it's ultimately, hey, we do this because we love it and we want to tell stories, right? So I don't think, it's always, I feel like it was when I first got to Hollywood, there was someone who was like, oh, it's not brain surgery, we're not sending off rockets, like it's not, so let's not act like that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, actors back in the old days in like Shakespeare times, they were called players. Yeah, we're playing. There's an extent to that, although often, we want to tell very serious stories and serious subject matter. That made me think about something, which is part of your job as a director is to, like we've been talking about a ton, just creating an atmosphere. And then within that, things can happen. I think that's especially the case with documentary. Is there any moments that you guys had making your films where there was a surprise? I mean, I know coming from animation, Dustin, things in that realm are so planned out. But when you're on a film set, the actor can slip up with a line, or maybe a subject in your documentary can just say something that you didn't expect. Can you spill some deets? Can you give us like can each of you give us something where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that was good and it made it in the movie? Leah, you want to take this one? What do you think?
So I'm reminded of Shape of Water, Del Toro, right? And there was this pole that was in his way for the shot that he wanted. And there was no way that this pole was going anywhere. And Michael Shannon had this scene where he had to drive the car somewhere, and it was a very expensive car. He drove the car, and something happened where it didn't go into park. And the car hit the pole, and the pole went down. And Shannon goes running to the director, and he's like, I'm so sorry. Like, it's the car damage. Does this ruin your scene? And the director's like, now it's perfect. So I take that to heart when thinking about if there's a mistake on set or something doesn't go your way. Like, oh no, the short film that I did, Two Dresses, 2 years ago, I had to move it, and I moved it specifically for my DP because she was going to be out of the country for 2 months. I'm like, I want you on this set. I'll just move it. That could be something that could be construed as, oh no, that's a problem, but it wasn't a problem. When you're blessed with more time, how is that ever a problem? So you take the thing that you see as contrary to making a film and you use it.
Is there any moment that you can tell us about in your film where it was like, maybe it was a mistake or it was spontaneous, sure, and if we watch it, we now know, oh, that was not planned?
You won't be able to see it because it was all in the background, but I rented cabins for filming out in Kern Valley, and one house was for the actors, one house was for filming, but my crew also stayed at the house. And one of the producers loves camping outside. Like, he goes to Burning Man every year, and he had his campsite set, but that's where I wanted to film. And I had told him I wanted to film there, and there was a miscommunication where he showed up on set and made his entire campsite. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we're shooting most of our scenes here. He goes, I can't pitch my tent anywhere else because the house was on a pitch. And so I talked to my DP, and we moved it to the other side of the house, and it looks gorgeous, and it works way better than it would have worked. And it's all the true stuff.
All right, so to those listening, when you watch Leah's film, take note of the position of the tent. Timothy, what about you? Anything on Me, Myself, and the Void that was kind of unexpected, but you know, a happy accident, maybe we can call it?
For sure. I mean, honestly, you know, the way I kind of approached, you know, because my two leads, you know, Jack Lucena and Chris Smith, were these incredibly gifted comedians, and they had such comfortable banter together as performers that it felt like I would be doing myself a disservice to not, for instance, my general approach was we'll get one that is basically exactly the script, and then we'll have a couple of ones where I kind of let them loose, you know, because they just are such comfortable performers together. And then my leading lady, Kelly Marie Tran, had actually also had a bit of a, you know, it's sort of lesser known because obviously she blasted onto the scene with Star Wars, but she'd done plenty of like sketch work back in the day and like improv stuff. So I just had these three actors who were good at changing the scene around a little bit and playing with it and having that play. So basically I had this approach of like, okay, you know, I'll do one that's exactly to the script, and then one where I just kind of let them throw things around. And there's lots of individual little lines that weren't in the script, and at this point I almost can't tell, having gone through the editing process. Sometimes I forget, like, oh wait, we never wrote that just happened on the day, or like, you know, but just because they're all just so funny and they're so gifted. So, you know, like the idea behind the get one for the script is basically like, you know, because who knows, sometimes you might get excited by something and then realize, no, actually we didn't need that line because it sets up something later. Or, you know, you want to make sure that you're still like honoring the choices you made as a writer, because who knows, you did think about your script, and it can be sometimes, you know, you can get too excited by something you've just seen. But I'm glad we did. I'm glad we had that approach, because it led to some fun stuff that is just peppered throughout the film.
So there's lines when people watch Me, Myself, and the Void where that was spontaneously coming from the actors. Yeah. And you were like, that's good. That's going in the final cut.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as it didn't disrupt the story. That's interesting. Dave and Dustin, was that your entire experience? I mean, doing a documentary, was it constantly that? What was that for you?
I mean, I don't want to call it a mistake because, nothing these guys said were mistakes. But when you watch the finished film, we have a huge set piece where we have actually recording of a downed helicopter in a firefight that's going on. And you think we planned this out and like this was one of the key moments of our film. We didn't know about it until we sat down to edit the section of downed helicopters. What had happened is one of our subjects, Jack Hughley, who was the lieutenant, was talking about how he's, lost 6 different roommates who'd been killed in Vietnam, including one of them was in a helicopter above them when they were on the ground and got shot down. And they had to fight for 3 hours to cover 300 yards to get the bodies. Very sad story. Like on its own, it's like that was sad. A year later, another one of our subjects, Ed Beal, hands us a tape, and it's a helicopter recording one of the pilots had taken. And he's like, "Hey, if you can use this," I'm like, "Cool, like we'll take a look. We'll have to find a tape recorder." Something my now 16-year-old daughters were totally mesmerized by. Until we sat down to edit, and I listened to the tape, and I was looking at Jack, and I was like, holy crap, I think that this recording is that day that Jack was talking about. And it was. Like Jack, at this point, 2 years before, in an offhand story, had told us about one of his roommates getting killed. Someone hands us a tape a year later, we listen in post-production, and sure enough, there's Jack Hughley's voice calling for support. Like, we have the tape from the day that he was talking about, totally by the grace of the spirits putting it all together, and we didn't know until we sat down to edit. And it became a huge moment in the film.
And that was unexpected.
Yes, very.
Wow. Yeah.
In a haunting, this might be cursed kind of a way.
And that was hard to edit that because it's real. This isn't like a Hollywood reenactment. Like you hear the pilots talking about their friend getting shot down, and that was actually really hard for us. Like, there is a balance of telling a story, but also a filmmaker, like at what point we never wanted to cross the line where we're exploiting stories just, to sensationalize the movie. But it did come down to, this is their story. This is real, and we have to tell it.
Yeah, weird question, but honest question is there kind of this battle in your head? I would imagine if I was in your shoes, where there's this voice that's kind of like, "Oh, this is really good. This is really interesting. Oh, and then but the human in you that wants to watch the thing and be like, Jesus Christ, like this is, and that wants to be there and be sort of.
There's one interview where Dave didn't make one of these people cry, right? So
yeah, wow.
He's sitting like 3 feet away from them, and I've got the audio recorder. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking over Charles's shoulder so I can see the monitor. I see that we're getting great, just beautiful footage, and at the same time, you're like, this is somebody's like this is one of their hardest moments, and so the filmmaker inside you is just like ecstatic. And the person who's trying to be quiet in the room so you get a good recording is like trying not to weep. And
it was, yeah. I mean, I'm 3 feet away from them. The camera is literally right next to me. And one of our guys, his wife had died a month before. He'd never talked about this stuff. And it's an emotional core to the movie, his first interview. And as a director, I remember sitting there that day going, oh my God, this is fantastic. And I was also thinking, and I caused this. So yeah, it was tough. And we did learn from that going on, because also you're sitting for so long and you don't want the chair to squeak or anything. And just your body starts rebelling and you kind of want to yawn. But someone's breaking down in front of you, and the last thing you want to do is be like, "Oh, sorry, go on." I mean, it's not out of boredom, and so we had to talk to him and say, "Hey, this is what happens. If this gets to be too much, let me know, and we will stop. Like at any point, we will stop. But if you don't say it, also this is what makes the movie, and we've got to go for it. So, like, these are the ground rules. This is all for you. At any point you say you want to stop, we'll stop. But if not." Like,
It's a very delicate emotional balance.
yes.
Yeah, you want to tell the story. You also want to be a nice, decent person who's taking care of them in the moment. Tim, do you and Leah, do you have that experience with actors on set? If there's a really high intense emotion, or even if it's really funny, like how are you negotiating the care you have for the people you're working with, and yet your creative mission? Do you have any insights on that? That's, I mean,
Yeah.
hard to follow the Vietnam story. That's tough, but
So filming in the light of the moon, I cast a lot of my friends because they're actors, and it was during the pandemic, and we were all in a bubble anyway. And my actor friend Haley Lipscomb, we were in the final scene of the movie, and she wasn't quite getting it. And that's your responsibility as a director, is to guide the actor into the emotion. And they come with all of their prep work and all of their background, but sometimes they need you, and that is your job. And so I remember blocking all of the rest of the crew out, and producers making pizza in the background for dinner. Like, it was really like hands on set. And I just sit down with her in the scene, and we talk like this close to each other. And I ask her, because I know her so well, I asked her this, and it's between her and I, so I'm not going to share it. But I asked her this question, and it hit her. And how it hit her is what she brought into the character. And watching her on screen and the monitor after that moment, I literally saw her level up as an actress. Like, she took what I said and she made it beautiful.
and after, is she like you manipulative, or is she, wow, thank you
She
so
agreed
much.
to
She
do
brought
all
this
the
out.
rest of my films with me.
She's like, this director gets me.
She's good. She's going places.
Great. That's a beautiful, that's a beautiful story. Yeah, Tim, is there any moments with actors where, or people you're working with on set where you're really having to figure out that balance of emotion and your creative mission?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm sure this will resonate. I think you're sometimes also just weighing up. Because on the one hand you've got a technical department who want to make sure everything's technically correct, but then you've got an actor who is bearing their soul, and sometimes those two things can be in contradiction with each other, and also can be in contradiction with, as you're saying, creative mission. There's a moment early in the film where, pretty early in the film, we hit you with sort of the inciting incident, and it's basically the Jack character realizing he walks in on his own body lying on the floor, and it's basically like a moment where he like hyperventilates and goes, oh my god, like I'm dead. Basically, it's the Sunset Boulevard moment. It's whoa, it's we're starting the movie here, sort of thing. And obviously for me as the writer, and I think as the audience in the film, that's a moment of intrigue, right? Like, it's like, ooh, a body on the floor, and then the cinematographer is excited about making sure everything's in focus, and it was this cool like pull out shot where we sort of reveal the body and all of this stuff. So it's intrigue, it's technical excitement, all that stuff. But for the actor doing that scene, having to go to a place of like, I'm hyperventilating, I'm freaking out, I'm having to, and I remember sort of having to like stop, us from, for instance, like calling cut too quickly to like sharply pull him in and out of that moment, because every time he had to play that scene, which for me as the writer is like, ooh, intrigue, he's having to like make himself actually get upset to like live that moment and do that moment authentically, and like, so you sometimes in the middle of a take, you're hearing someone technically whisper, it's a little bit soft, like, call cut, and I'm like, I'm not gonna yank him right out of this moment, and I'm gonna be delicate with how many takes we're gonna do. And so I think that's sort of an example of like, you're dealing with all of that input, and you're having to remember, okay, there's a human in front of that camera trying to give you something, there's an actor really trying to like, bare his soul, do it honestly. And sometimes those things can be in contradiction with what the scene is going to be when it's all finished, So that was an example of something that when we're talking about that contradiction, like, I remember that stuck with me as like, because I just remember those moments.
Yeah, again, really tricky balance to pull off. I'd love to, I can pursue this topic all day. We are going to have to wrap up in a bit, but I want to give you all the opportunity to share any other upcoming projects you might have, or final parting thoughts you want to leave us with. Dustin, Dave, or Leah,
Tim,
sorry.
I really enjoyed your film. I saw it at Dances with Films a couple of weeks ago, and I really thought it was a fun little realm. When the car disappeared, I wasn't expecting it. It had exactly I think what you were searching for. Cheers.
No, thank you so much. And
Is there any other upcoming projects you got, Timothy? You want to share?
Yeah. I mean, so I've got two shorts that I'm hopefully going to be putting out into the fall festival circuit, and I'm hopefully working to, strikes pending, set up a next feature for next year. One of the shorts, and I think connecting to, I actually probably over this panel had the least doc experience, but I kind of did my first sort of exploratory pulling from all this old home video footage. It's almost more of like a thought piece, but it was my first experience with the whole, like, what do I have? And then going to the script and then going through the footage and then realizing, oh wait, actually that's not what this is, and having to sort of, play that thing, go back and forth. Editing is writing. Like, it hit that message home for me in a really cool way. So that's been a fun one. It's been a cool sort of opportunity to like revisit my own history and all of that kind of stuff. So that's something I'm putting out. It's called Is This Something? Speaking to that creative philosophy I was talking about earlier. So yeah, I'm excited to share that. And
is that going on festivals? Or are you putting it online? Okay, you're doing the festival route.
Yeah, submitting to a couple of fests, and right. I'm sure it'll eventually make its way online, but that's sort of the idea. Yeah.
All right, we'll be on the lookout. Leah, any other upcoming projects you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I'm putting together my next feature film in Italy. It's a magical realism film based loosely on my life as a film projectionist. We have it almost fully funded, and our location scouted last year. And of course, what Timothy said, which is strikes, pending. And I'm in the middle of doing a documentary as well. Producing, not directing, and then ask a writer director what they're working on. The list is so long. I'm working on my first TV series as well. It's about the mafia in the 1930s and the rise of the five families, but revisionist history.
Whoa. Okay, so you're busy.
Not busy. I'm not busy at all. No.
Yeah, just vacant schedule. Wow. Okay. Well, I'd love to know more about that TV series. That sounds fascinating. We do need to wrap up. Dave, Dustin, any final or upcoming projects you want to tell us about?
I think our main goal is, it's weird because, you make a short or a narrative, and a lot of people will see that as a calling card, and you get your next project, which is normally cool, but we do feel a very strong, we owe it to the veterans to see this through, and so our main project is getting the documentary widely released wherever that may end up being. But also we do have a staple of scripts, someone that will see our vision and help us choose that next project, whether it be from our scripts or having it's going to be the story. That's what we want to look at. Dustin?
Yeah, kind of where the story takes us is kind of where we're headed. Dave and I really like chasing down ideas all the way to the ground. So
and I just want to thank all of you for sharing. That is all the time we have for today. But Dave, Dustin, Leah, Tim, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for talking about your incredible work and giving us some insight into your process. I thought it was really fascinating. Oh, and also, gotta say thank you to Impact 24 PR. They put this panel together. And thanks to everyone for watching and for listening. Be sure to check out Ermontourage and Real Deal Happy Hour. You'll get more events like these, some good networking opportunities, panels. So stay tuned. And again, to our directors, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.